Hi everyone, welcome to Software Testing channel. In today's video, we will discuss about test case. What is test case definition? Why do we need test cases? And when do we actually write test cases? And what are different attributes associated with the test case? And I will explain the same attributes with an example. At the end, we will go through how to documenting test cases in one of the test management tool, test trail. There are many tools, one of them is test trail. Let's get started. So definition: test case is sequence of steps to be followed to validate specific use case in a given application. So when the requirement is given to QA team, the requirement or customer use case might have like multiple scenarios within that, and each scenario is called a test case. The next one is like, why do we need test cases? So test cases are needed to ensure thorough validation of the functionality or application. It means when the requirement is explained by product team to QA will understand like all the use cases, all different scenarios associated with the requirement. So what will happen in real time is, if we don't document all the different scenarios or edge cases or corner scenarios, that whatever we think of during requirement review, so it is general tendency like we might forget some of the scenarios and then we might not be able to cover those during testing. So that's why it's always better we document these test cases in detail, so that when you are actually executing, we do not have to think about these scenarios, because these are well documented. We can simply go through those and then execute whether they are working or not in the implemented application. That is one. And then when you are documenting test cases also, based on the number of test cases, it will help QA team to provide like QA estimates. How much time does QA take to execute the given functionality? And in real world, sometimes what will happen is QA will get the requirement at the end of the release cycle or just before the release. At that time, they have to prioritize what are like very high important scenarios to validate out of all like 100 or 1000 test cases. So if we do not have those test cases in place, by assigning it right priority, we will not be able to choose the test cases that are needed to be executed in the critical timelines. So that's how, like, once we document the test cases and by assigning like which are like very critical test cases, high, medium, low, some like that, it will help during project sign off phase also for execution purpose. So okay, next one is like, once documented can be reused for future enhancements. What will happen is like, let's take an example of WhatsApp. So if we have test cases related to message sending functionality, and then let's say like WhatsApp implemented some other functionality to the message saying like send and receive notifications should be sent whenever you send a message. So all the existing test cases whatever are written for messages will be useful when you are actually testing those notifications. Similarly for any application. So as we start documenting more and more test cases, whenever you do some enhancements, you will come to know, okay, for the existing functionality, so some 10 or 15 test cases are there, and we have to execute them to make sure like nothing is impacted because of new changes. So that's how, like, always document test cases, and these will be used in future for any enhancements to the existing functionality. And then helps in automating the functionality, meaning once we document the test case for functionality, when you try to automate those scenarios using automation tools, it will help you to know like what all different scenarios that we need to automate, and it helps in prioritizing also based on the test case priority. So another advantage is it will help dev team also in writing thorough unit and integration tests. What will happen is like whenever we are testing an application, once the requirement walkthrough is done, QA will go through the requirements and write the test cases, and QA always try to review the test cases with product and dev teams, so that they are aware of all the test scenarios that QA team is thinking. So and then we will try to do this before development is done with their code changes. So because we are reviewing all our test cases before development complete their code changes, they can actually consider these scenarios during their development, and then it in turn helps to reduce number of defects in QA. We are kind of like preventing defects from happening. So that's how test cases will help in a development life cycle. And it helps in onboarding new team members to the project also. Meaning, let's say if there are like 3 QAs in a project and then they were writing test case to the project, when new person joins the team, so for them to understand the application, so we always redirect them to go through the test cases so that they can understand and they can execute those test cases on the applications. Once they execute the test cases, they will along with the functionality, they will understand all the edge cases and how to prepare test data, etc. for each scenario. So that's why like it's always good practice and it's always mandatory to write test cases for any application. And when do we write test cases? So in most of the organizations, QA team will start documenting test cases as soon as the requirement walkthrough completed from product team. So for any project, once the requirements are finalized, product manager will give a walkthrough on each requirement in detail to QA, dev teams, so that they can, from dev team side, they can plan their development activities. At the same time, QA can start planning their QA activities. So kind of like preparing test plan and documenting test cases, etc. So that's when like as soon as the requirements review is done, QA will start documenting test cases. And then after completing test cases, as we discussed some time back, QA team will review test cases from product and dev team to get alignment and identify if any edge cases needs to be considered. So from product side, because they have like more visibility, they might give a feedback saying like, hey, we need to cover so and so scenarios. Or at the same time from dev side, because they are very near, they are the ones who are actually doing code changes, they can suggest like some edge cases, or they might think like because of the functionality or because of the code changes we are doing, some of the existing functionality might get impacted. Example, if you take the same case for WhatsApp, if they are doing changes, if they are adding like group messaging functionality newly, they might say like, hey, you might have to test like existing messages functionality also, because we are adding group messages, we are doing some changes to the same code that is being used for regular messages also. That's how like reviewing with the dev and product will help. And then along with getting feedback for QA team, it also helps dev team, because they do know like some of the corner scenarios that QA is planning to test. So they kind of like try to cover or try to do the code changes for those corner scenarios so that they won't get these defects during QA phase. Overall at project level, it will improve the quality. Okay. Next, go to test case attributes. So for each test case, whenever you document, each test case will have a title and then it will be associated with a feature. Example, when you are testing like for WhatsApp, it is kind of messages, group messages, those are all different features, notifications, etc. Similarly for Gmail, when we are discussing about login functionality, login is like one feature. Similarly, once you log in, you will have like inbox, etc, etc. Each one is a feature. So we always try to map these test cases with a feature in an application, feature or functionality in an application, so that in future whenever either dev team or product team asks for like test cases related to specific functionality, we can easily give those group of test cases we call as test suites. For each feature we will be creating one test suites and it will have the test cases under that. And then priority. Why do we need priority? So priority is kind of like critical, high, medium, low. So why do we need priority is, so when we are doing testing, after the code is given to QA, during testing phase, we will always try to execute the test cases that are very very important from customer perspective. And then if those test cases are working, and then we will try to go through like critical, high, medium and low, so that even if high, medium and low test cases are not working, those defects might not impact the customers directly. So that's why like we always try to prioritize that QA execution also based on test case priority. So this priority actually helps during QA execution phase for planning. Author is the person whoever write the test case. And type, so the test cases can be type functional, sanity, regression, performance, security, etc. So let's say like if you have test case for login functionality, when the customer provide like username and password and then click on next, they should be able to log in. That's kind of like functional. And then if you say like when they provide username and password and click on next button, the user ID or password, the password, those credentials should be encrypted over the wire when these credentials are sent for authentication. So that is kind of like security. Similarly, like after clicking on login button, they should be able to log in within, let's say like 1 second or 0.5 seconds or whatever it is. That is kind of like performance. They will check like, okay, how much time it is actually taking. It's kind of like latency or performance testing. So based on the functionality we are trying to verify, it may become like functional test case or sanity test case or regression or performance, security, etc. And the next one is like prerequisites. So in some of the tools it is called preconditions also. So if you want to verify or if you want to execute these test conditions, what are the prerequisites you need? Example, for Gmail functionality, if you want to verify, you should already have a valid username and password, then only you can test login functionality. That is kind of a prerequisite. Similarly for WhatsApp, if you want to verify messaging functionality, you should have like WhatsApp installed on sender and receiver phones, then only you can test messaging functionality. That's kind of prerequisite for that scenario or test case. And what is test data? So the same thing here. Test data is like, so if you want to test like example, you have a Gmail account should be created, whatever the email and password, you can have like those hard coded in the test case itself, so that whenever somebody is executing, they don't have to create new test accounts every time. They can simply use the existing test accounts, username and password, and then validate the functionality. That's kind of test data for this. For Gmail login, it is very simple, but there might be scenarios in real world where you need to call multiple services, or you need to have like separate environment to validate the functionality. That's where test data will actually helps. And then steps. Now if you take an example of Gmail, you have you need to validate login functionality. It means like it has steps saying like first you need to log into Gmail website and then provide username, password, and then click on next button. These are kind of like step-by-step procedure. That's what steps means. So we'll see in detail in the example. And these are kind of like all the attributes for test case. And then when you are actually executing the test case in the test management tool, that's where the QA, whoever is executing, they will provide what is the actual result and status, whether it is passed or failed each step. When all the steps are passed, then we will mark the test case as passed. So let's take an example. So example, we are trying to validate login to Gmail, and it might have like multiple ways to test. So for our scenario, we are trying to log in. Customer should be able to log in with email and password. Here it is clearly defined like email and password. So that's how test case should be very specific functionality. Here we are trying to validate login functionality, and within login we are trying to validate with email and password. So that's how like test case is kind of like specific condition we are trying to validate, or we are trying to assert for a given feature. And here we are saying like feature is login, priority is critical. Why the test case is critical? If login itself is not working, then there is no way we can go ahead and release the application. That's why it has to work. That's why the priority is critical. Author is like whoever is writing, their name will become author. And then type is sanity. The reason why we call it as sanity is, so whenever the functionality is given to QA, this is the example. If they are testing Gmail functionality, this is the minimal feature that should work. If the login functionality itself is not working, then QA team cannot go ahead with the testing. That's why we call it as sanity testing. So I will explain these testing types, sanity, functional regression in later videos. Prerequisites or precondition is customer should have an existing Gmail account. And test data is if they have Gmail account, provide email name and password so that they can quickly test using these test user email and password. And then these are the steps. So if you see here, we are kind of like clearly explaining or providing step by step so that anyone can simply execute by following these steps. So if this is how like we write test cases. First, navigate to Gmail website. Customer should be navigated to Gmail login page. That is the expected result. And then when they provide valid email address and click on next button, this is the step. Customer should be navigated to next screen to provide password is the expected result. And then the next one is provide valid password and then click on next button. Once they provide password and next button, customer should log in successfully and navigate to home page with inbox highlighted. So this is how we provide like clear steps so that whenever QA is executing, they can simply follow the steps and execute. And while during QA execution, so along with this, for every step they provide like what is the actual result. So let's say if the customer is not able to navigate to login page, then they'll say like customer is not able to navigate to login page, and they will fail the test step and test case. So for our case, we said like, okay, customer navigated to Gmail login page, and then customer navigated to next screen to provide password, and then the next one is like customer logged in successfully, navigated to home page with inbox highlighted. So we kind of clearly provide like what is observed actually in the application. And then for each of the steps we mark the status as pass, and then at the end the test case will be passed. So this is how we document test case. And then let's go through demo on how do we do these the same steps whatever we discussed, creating test case and executing test case. So I'll give a demo in test trail. So the way test trail works is, in test trail for a given project you can have like multiple test suites. Each test suite is kind of having all the test cases. It's kind of like group of test cases for a given feature. For our demo, let's create test suites called login, and then we provide a description, document, test cases related to login functionality. So it's kind of like feature, and then we can add a test case. Let's go to the test suites. Now the new test suite is created, and click on add test case here or here. Click on add test case. Then as we discussed, here we have test. For every test case we will have a title. We can say like login customer should be able to log in with valid email and password. And then these are in test trail we have different templates for test case. For us, we'll take test case with the detailed steps, and then this is like test case type as sanity. And then because it is login, we'll choose the priority as critical. And then these are other other fields we can ignore for now, and then we can provide estimate also, like how much time does it take for any QAE to execute this test case. This estimate will help when we try to provide QA estimates for QA execution. And then preconditions or prerequisites, as we discussed. So for this we can say like customer should have existing Gmail account, and then we can add these steps kind of like help whenever QA try to execute the test case. Let's add step. Navigate to Gmail, mail.google.com, and customer should be navigated to Gmail login page, and then add next step, provide valid email address, click on next button. So we'll say like this is the expected result for this step. Customer should be navigated to next screen to provide password, and then add another steps, provide valid password, and then click on next button. Here customer should be logged in successfully, inbox should be displayed. So this is how we write, and then the test data for this is we can provide like email, some valid email ID, and then we can say password, some valid password, so that whenever QAE try to execute this test case, they can simply use these email ID and password and then validate the functionality. Then we'll say like add test case. So once we add the test case, we'll see like when the actual result and test case status also will come. So what we'll do is like we'll go here and then say like run test. So we'll provide like login. So for now we can skip these, and then we can say like include all, quickly create a test run, and then so here is the test case. Here is the new test run created. Once you click on this, at the starting you can say like the status is untested. Now click on this. Let's try to run the test case. So click on add result, and then you can set the status for each of the steps. Let's say navigate to login, and then say passed. Here you can say like enter actual result, customer navigated to login page. Then similarly next select this, passed. Then we can say like customer navigated to next screen to provide password, and then here also we can say like it is passed, then provide actual result, customer logged in successfully, inbox highlighted. Then these are like this is how we execute the test case. Once we execute the test case, we will provide the status as passed. and if it is failed, then we'll provide like overall comments like why it is failed, and we'll try to add the attachments or video or screenshots based on the scenario. Once it is done, we'll say add result. Now you can see like the test case is marked as passed. Now if you come back to the test run login, it will say like there is only one test case in our scenario, so one is passed, so 100% is set to passed. So that's how in real time QA team write the test cases and then execute the test case, and then once the test case execution is done, we'll share the results to our stakeholders, mostly to product teams and dev teams, saying like, hey, QA team executed these test cases, here is the result. Thank you all for watching.